Yes, we are live. All right, Pambulem, this is not just a quick one. I don't say why they try for run a program on Liberia. Of course, I don't run a couple of programs on Liberia before. I don't interview some very important guests, them from Liberia, officials from Liberia, friends from Liberia. But it's been quite a while. And especially so in the advent of recent development, i.e., pre-election and post-election. Okay, so I've been promised a couple of times, but Usai, I'll not be able for meet up. However, whenever we promise something, we intend for do them. So now, in this same vein, we decide for run a quick commentary on George Oppong Manneh Weah, the former president of Liberia, not too long ago. In fact, even handover yet. So, like I say again, I've been promised for do something on Liberia many a times, even as important as the elections. When I've been a couple of Liberian friends and officials, I for don't run a program and I talk to them, so then we supposed for appear one at a time, like 5 minutes, 2 minutes, a little bit comment here and there. Unfortunately, something else crop up, so I'll not be able to make them. However, I want to run a quick program on George Weah in rise to fame, the presidency, and a story of humility, how George Weah show pure humility, a demonstrating background. Anyway, Fambulem, this is the TNN TV Media Empire program. My name is Prince Emil Kroma. Today is the 3rd of December 2023. The time on my side is 10:13, 30 minutes past 10. And the Empire, no one for let you touch the dial. We are help for shape, okay? We can't talk about George Weah a little bit. Thank you and keep tuned. Yes, Pambul, and welcome to another edition of the TNN TV Media Empire program. My name is Prince Emil Kroma, and we want to talk quickly about George Oppong Manneh Weah. First of all, George come up from a very humble background, and he come up from nothing. I mean, real poverty. None of the background and the side George come up from. When I say poverty, you know what poverty mean? It mean extremely poor. Such was George. But he was a very humble guy and a very jovial guy. So at the early stage then, I don't know him back then. And I can't both say I know him too much. I know some of the stories them. I have had acquaintances with people who are close, very close to George. I've had interactions with him on more than one occasion. Via football, before he traveled, before he began his semi-pro, where we will talk about briefly, and then after he became pro on a different level. So yes, did meet up places, had conversation, and been dinner he missed. But it's not a personal acquaintance. I must make that clear. When we've been there, I've been there Monrovia, by the way, and I played football as well, not on that exotic level, honestly. I was not too bad a player, but my focus been there on some other social aspects other than the game. If I've been paying attention to it, maybe it would have been a different story. So if you play the game in Liberia those days, then get ways them out. They do organize football meetings. I mean, team play. So you can leave from one city to the other just to go play another team on a lower level. Doesn't have to even be on an organized national level, just from community to community. Such was how football was great in the country and the cohesion that it created in communities. So I'm fortunate to have been in one of these communities. Not only that one, because I I lived on the old road, at some point, VP Road, and then later moved on the Capital Bypass as I mature in life. Okay. So made many, many of friends, and up to this day, me and these friends are still in touch. We are still in contact. So it was one or two of these occasions, going to play football. I came across George, played against him on the other side, about two or three occasions. Um, he was born to be a star. He was outgoing. What I know about him is he's a good storyteller, and that has been confirmed. I didn't even know this then because yes, he would just like people being around him, and then just talk, tell stories. And he's a funny guy as well. I mean, he can make people laugh. Yeah. And people like that, from those early stages, it wasn't noticed then, but he had the traits and tendencies of leadership. Not what later became, or how he got to the presidency or how he became president, but those attributes were there. I think it was spotted by probably very few people. Not a lot of people will have seen it because, I mean, the guy's background was extremely poor. But he was the humble guy. He will play football all day long and will beg people practically, come on, guys, let's go and play. My mayor can't let go play, this and that and what have you. Like to put people together as long as it's about football. And there was barely anything to eat. Okay. And this is the level of poverty that I'm talking about. If you're lucky, you have your cup of gari or farinha, as some people will call it, then you're good to go. You get it with sugar, you get it with peanuts, grumpy, Liberians call it. And if you're lucky, you got milk with it. My goodness, that's an excellent meal. And you know how Gary will be heavy and I will carry you for the rest of the day. You will just be drinking water. And this is what it were then. Anyway, um, he grew up in one of the poor suburbs in Monrovia, that's across the bridge, Claratown, Gibraltar, all those end. That's basically across the bridge. Across the bridge in Liberian parlance is where the industrial center is. That's where you'll find Freeport. So across the bridge, basically, for those of you who will know Monrovia, is when you cross the bridge from the city center, that would be Broad Street. I think there are two crossings, or there used to be two crossings. And that's over the river. So there were bridges. One was the Waterside Bridge, Waterside, Liberians say Waterside, the Waterside Bridge, and then the People's Bridge. It was, I think, the Gabriel Tucker Bridge. I can't remember the name when it was built, yeah, around OAU 1979. And then I think when Samuel Doe and others took over, they renamed it the People's Bridge. So these were the two crossings from main downtown Monrovia, Broad Street, to go across the island. Across the island, that's where you will find poverty, basically, ghettos, criminality. I'm not saying ghettos were not in the city center, and I lived there, so I know all of these things. So anyway, having said this is the background where the guy came from. But he was very humble. He was more like an absolute lover of football. Play generally, he loved play. If he's not playing football, maybe he'll be sitting somewhere telling story of beating drum, or the beating drum, and then you telling the story. Something like that. And it was always good that people sit, just like long time ago, whether it's the kitangos under a tree and people doing storytelling under the moonlight. It was something reminiscent of that. Anyway, having played football, became popular with football. People knew him. He played for a couple of division teams in lower levels, and then from what I learned was he went to Mighty Barul. Then Mighty Barul, I don't know what the situation now. I don't think it's the same as it used to be. It was a very powerful team, and their closest rival was Invincible 11. So there's a tribe in Monrovia, in Liberia, the Bassa tribe. They actually owned the club, ran the club, Mighty Barul. I'm not saying that they never had different kind of players. Of course, they had players from different walks of life, different tribal background, and etc., etc. But predominantly, it was a Barca sort of club. It was a majority supported club by people from the Barca ethnic grouping, and very powerful. And they were passionate, just like the Ashanti Kotakos, the Aztec Mimosas, the Arab contractors of their time. Okay. And their closest rival was Invincible 11, which was in short called IE. Those were great days, man, great football days between these two rival clubs. So you had Liberia's most celebrated player, known as James Salensa Deba. Salensa, he was more popularly known as Salensa, but his name was James Deba. Okay. And this guy, look, man, he was the full package. When I say full package, he was known for football, but beyond football, he had other qualities as well. He was a good-looking guy. He was well dressed, and he was social. He appeared a bit shy, but no, he was just plain conservative, I believe, because I was around the circle a few times. We were even supposed to bring him on the Then and Now platform for an interview, talked with him a few times, agreed, but somewhere I think he lost interest, and that was it. So he was the greatest Liberian footballer of his time. Okay. And according to what I learned, the first team of prominence on the first division level, premiership, if you like, that George Weah went to was Mighty Barrel, and he was taken there by Salensa Deba, who was the crown prince, if not the king of Mighty Barrel. And when I say the crown, I mean he was known as Liberia's most celebrated player. That was the title accorded him, and people gave him all that respect as per that title, including men, women, and children. I am telling you, the guy was powerful, a player. I'm talking about Salensa Deba, just briefly. I have seen, and we equated it at the time because I watch a lot of his football matches, and he will always make the difference. I mean, you will count on him, and then he will make the difference. I heard defenders upon defenders talking about James Deba. They don't know what will come of them when the guy takes the football and and drives the football towards them. Okay. He is so tough. He is so strong. It's like a rock, a wall. These are described as, defenders describing Deba. And basically, after a game, the Barca women, these are people who traditionally tie their lappers. This is their tradition. Most of them have got money. They are marketeers, business women. They will basically take the lappers off and spread it for the guy to walk. Do you feel my drift? They will basically take off the lappers and spread it for Salensa Deba to walk. Anyway, George was later to leave Mighty Barrel for Invincible 11. So they became two of the most prominent players of their time, and they were in the top two teams in the country. That when a clash, a derby, as we know it now, two teams from the city, those two teams, when they meet, it's almost like a national holiday. Because if they play at either one of the two stadiums, whether it's Antoinette Topman Stadium, which is somewhere around, I believe, Lynch Street, somewhere where the BTC is, that's the Barracks, Barclay Training Center. That's where you have this old stadium. We used to call it Ballhead, because there was no carpet, grass, nothing. It had a patch. And then if it is SKD, that was the modern complex. SKD was for Samuel Kayondo Stadium. We just used to call it, in short, abbreviated SKD. And so it will be all attention. Everything will be focused in those places. I mean, basically everything will come to a stop until after those games. Anyway, in one of those games, I'm just going to skip a little because I wanted to make this thing short, precise, concise, and sweet. In one of those matches, we had a rumor. The LFA, which is the Liberian Football Association, was coming to town. Was celebrating its 50th anniversary. 50th anniversary. So on that occasion, to celebrate that auspicious occasion, they invited several top teams within the West African region. If I can remember well, it was Iwanyanwu of Nigeria, Tone Clara Club from Yaoundé, Cameroon. It was Fisheries from Sierra Leone, and Mighty Barrel, i.e., I believe there was one more team. I can't recall, but those were the teams. And this was a major tournament, of some kind of proportion at the time, involving top sides. Tonnerre was killing it in Cameroon. Iwanyanwu at the time was top in Nigeria. So can you imagine? And Sierra Fisheries was doing quite well. And guess who was the star man on Sierra Fisheries at the time? It was the late Ishmael Daifan. May so rest in peace. Liberian guys fancy. When I'm telling you, there are a few things Liberians fancy about Sierra Leoneans. One of them is education. They love the Sierra Leonean education system and admire it a lot. I know this for sure. And the other thing was Ishmael Daifan. Not generally football, but Ishmael Daifan. He was the toast of Liberians. Mameda guy can play. That's them. And Ishmael could play. Of course, those of you who know him, the late Ishmael, may so rest in peace. So he made that team. That was the last time I ever saw him, because I watched almost every one of those games. So during those games, rumor had it that one of these teams had come for Salenza, and it didn't surprise anyone, James Deba, because he was the star man. He was the linchpin. He was the country's most celebrated player. So they came for him. But again, he was a bluff boy, really bluff boy. Imagine at some point I told you, I don't go saying these things about my fellow man. Doesn't mean that I don't have people I admire, but I don't go singing these songs. But yes, he was a cute-looking guy. It's women that are supposed to be saying that. He was outgoing, he was well-dressed, and on top of it, he was playing football on the top level, and he was the star man. Trust me, man. Anyway, in a couple of the matches, he didn't turn up. He was mostly wearing his baggies and well-dressed and turning up, not on training ground, neither the football, whereas George Weah was turning up full time because he loved football. I told you from the beginning. He was so passionate about football, he would come begging people. And then one of the games, I can't remember between who, in that particular tournament, he got injured. They had to take him off to patch his head up because he was bleeding. They bandaged his entire head. Instead of leaving the match, he still continued playing. Of course, this was George. Those of us who knew him regarding football knew exactly that, except his legs will not carry him any longer. But as long as he does, he will go back on the field and play. And that's exactly what he did. And I believe to this day that he impressed everybody, all those officials from those teams that turn up. And Tonnerre Yaoundé Clara Club had come, was basically in search of players. And George was impressive. So the long and short of this all, that's how George landed his first semi-pro contract. That's how George landed his first semi-pro contract with Tonnerre Yaoundé Club in Cameroon. He went to Cameroon. By then, the ambassador to Cameroon, Liberian ambassador to Cameroon, was the late Carlton Capet, who was part of the people who helped to engineer the contract, signing of contract, the protocols, because of course, he was the Liberian ambassador in Cameroon, so he was representing the interests of George. What we did learn, the money that was paid to George for that contract, which was $30,000. That was a mighty good money at that time, and for semi-professional, $30,000. Ladies and gentlemen, except George will tell me that, yes, he ate some of that money. But what we did learn then, and up to this day, it is my belief that George never ate a penny out of his own contract money. All these Gobachevs, Gorbachev, Liberian say Gorbachev. This Bella, them, like Salomon say Bella, all around this guy. Because he wasn't, yeah, kind of smart up there in that sense. And all he wanted to do was play football. So imagine he's playing football for free around Monrovia, all over the place. And he's given an opportunity to go to Cameroon to play. So he wasn't focused on the money. He was much more focused on the football. This is a story of humility. This is a story of innocence. Some may say ignorance. But this was to come and bless him and raise him up to higher heights. He never ate a penny. So he went to Cameroon. He played. Before going to Cameroon, it was the Ghanaians. Their names were all over the place. The Ghanaians were good in football. I was a great admirer of Ghanaian football. Most of the fans, the players of Ghana, were ones that I really admired at the time, whether it was Abdul Razak, George Alassane, Kofi Nte, Prince Opoku Pole, Odate Lamte, and Ansah, the goalkeeper. Many of them, I've forgotten the names. We used to know the names, you're like off head. So these are the guys that were plying their trades both in Africa, where they had contracts, semi-pro contracts, and largely in Europe. They are Betty Pellis, and one of you was already in France playing and making a name for himself internationally. So one of the Ghanaian players who was in Cameroon then, who was really on top of the game, is one that most of us will know, because before leaving for Cameroon, he played around the West African region, both in Liberia and I believe in Sierra Leone. He's called Kofi Abre. Yeah, Kofi Abre. I hope I pronounced the name right. Of course, these are decades ago. I'm forgetting some of these names now. This guy was killing it, man, in Cameroon until the arrival of King George. When George arrived in Cameroon, Kofi Abre was nowhere. He was finished. This guy was a diminutive winger. Very good, just like we used to have somebody like that in the Sierra Leonean national team. I think John Dumbuya. Yeah, very diminutive winger. That was Kofi Abre. George arrived in Cameroon. Immediately, he became the star man, the point man. The long and short of it all, and these were the days when Roger Miller was on top of his game. Playing, man. Yeah. Then the Cameroonian national coach, Claude Leroy, was a French guy. Of course, because he was stationed in Cameroon, he was equally scouting for French teams. By then, Ligue 1, the French National League, was one of the top leagues in the world at the time, alongside Serie A, the Italian National League. So he spotted George Weah and recommended George Weah to Arsene Wenger. That's how it all started between George and Arsene Wenger. Introduced by Claude Leroy, the Cameroonian national coach. George he flew into Monaco, where Arsene Wenger was managing at the time, and they gave George a trial. This is something that I've read in a book by Wenger, and I've heard an interview by Wenger about George Weah when he arrived the first time, and the trial match. This African was all over the place. Practically chasing the ball all over the place. And what we knew about George then, or what we used to think about him, was he was lazy. He could play, but not a very strong guy. That's before he left for semi-pro and going towards pro football. But when he went to for this trial, this is what Wenger is telling us now, that this guy was all over the place because he wasn't refined. He was a rough diamond, if you like, if I can, basically use that kind of a metaphor. So Wenger was impressed, because if you have a guy running behind the ball all over the place for 90 minutes or whatever time he was given in this trial match, it means that this guy has got raw passion for the game. He loves the ball. He loves the game. And the idea that it's all over the place, it means that we can refine him. We can cut him and polish him and make him in our own mold, the way we want him. And that's exactly what Wenger was to do. Wenger polished up George. He polished up George. That's why George owe him up to this day. The greatest of respect is for Wenger. And the guy was not thinking, it wasn't about money. No, it was just about football. Yes, you're moving away from poverty, but the poverty I believe that was on his mind then is, can you imagine they take you away from Claratown, from a mat house, from no food? And even George himself have said it, he confided with close friends who have told us those stories because we were not there then. He said, look at the people. He said, the people gave me house. They feed me 3 times and they send me in the gym. So it wasn't about the money. It was just this new sort of environment, wealth, if you like. This is exactly what was happening and how it began for George. And then, of course, he signed his first professional contract with Monaco. Wenger polished him up. He became a megastar. But all along when he was being made a megastar, making name all over the world began to know him. He started putting his country, Liberia, on the map, football. I remember during the war, the only good thing about Liberia then was George Weah. Every good thing could be equated to George Weah because everything was bad. The country was in complete darkness because of this war that was being fought, this brutality, this mayhem, this chaos, this barbarity that had been unleashed on this nation, in which over 250,000 Liberians were to lose their lives, and a country that was promising, in which a lot of people went to fend for themselves, went down the gutter, down the drain. And since then, that country has never risen again. Because what happened to that country, if it had happened to any other country, they will suffer a similar consequence until the whole world come together to raise it to another level or the level that it used to be. It will continue to be as it is. There's plenty of poverty and all the things that come with poverty. Okay. So anyway, it wasn't about the money. He had his professional contract. He started getting huge in the world, started winning accolades. And the humility that I was talking about is this guy will always fly and come home. And, will even play matches when possible, where possible. But mostly it was to come for the national team and motivate them and fly them out for training sessions and to honor their obligations, like with the Cup of Nations and other things like that. It was George with his own money. George was flying private jet. He was jetting into Monrovia every other couple of months, and sometimes people like us will be fortunate to be in that circle. Being in that circle, not like personally, like he knows me, you're like, personally, no. Maybe I will know somebody there or I will use some influence, and just try to, because it was the place to be. I mean, it was so peaceful. It was so lovely. After all the stress of war, your life, it's in the hands of others that it can be taken anytime. But every time that George flies into Monrovia, okay, there is peace, there is calm, there's serenity. I don't know how they used to conjure this, but it would almost be like a ceasefire, and everything else will be focused on George. This great son of the soil has arrived, and to do noble deeds, worthy causes. And that's what George was doing. This is why I had great respect for him, and it used to hurt me, when people were insulting him when he started getting into politics. I could understand why, but I don't agree. And some of the people that were doing it largely were people who were not kind of familiar with him, because these were young people who grew up after the war. Those of us who were around during the war knew that this guy, he helped save a lot of people directly and indirectly. Sometimes it will be money that he will give people, sometimes it's communities. I mean, he was exceptional. No one really thought that he was going to go into politics. Honestly, I don't know the story of how he got into politics, but I do remember one time Charles Taylor made a remarks because George said something. I think it was April 6, 1996, or one of those wars. There were many different wars fought during the entire civil strife tribal war in Liberia. He made a comment which Charles Taylor felt offended by, and for that, his building, his house rather, was burnt. He had a house in one of those streets, I think 9th Street or somewhere. Can't remember the street again, but one of those streets. I heard I even knocked down that house and built a new complex right there. But these were one of the few properties that he had when he started getting money. Charles Taylor burnt it down to the, not down to the ground, of course, it was massive concrete, but the act of arson was performed on the house. And then I heard Taylor, this is something that I heard myself from Charles Taylor saying, this guy is my seat that he wants. In other words, he wants to be president. This is my very first time hearing about George wanting to be president. I mean, this was strange because all George was playing football, fly in, fly out, help the national team, pay transport, help who he can help, see friends, tell stories, and then he's gone again. Now Charles Taylor is talking about this guy wants to become president. He wants my seat. So there was a bit of enmity between he and Taylor during that period. So imagine Taylor himself was using George in some respect because Taylor was a warlord. And all that was happening in the country was fight, 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 fight. George Weah was the man of peace. He's coming, and when he comes, the whole country will rally around him. Because that means there will be no war. That means the guns will be silent. That means people can move about, here for that little period of time, looking for food, meeting relatives, checking on friends. But as soon as he flies out, real despair sinks in. I mean, I was there. I'm telling you something that I really witnessed. I was part of it. Okay. Anyway, George started, he went mega star. He became huge to a point where, without even going to the World Cup, because he had finished with all the defenders at the time. And at that time, the defenders, these defenders, I'm not saying we don't have defenders now, but those defenders that they had then, George finished with every one of them. I mean, basically, testimonial after testimonial from fellow players and friends on his level. It's like, well, this guy can do anything with the ball. I mean, there's not much left, to do with the ball. He can play basically magic. He can perform magic with the ball. And yes, he did. Scored powerful goals, went down on record, set new records. That's what this guy was doing in Europe, in the white man's world. This poor little kid from Claratown, from across the river, from across the bridge, had made his way to Europe and conquering Europe, having places named after him. Such was the height of fame. And then he had to leave France. After conquering France, now he's going to another powerful league, if not the best at the time. This is Serie A. Sign a contract. By then, I've forgotten how many million. Of course, nothing compared to now, but at the time, this was massive. That's AC Milan. George is going to AC Milan. And there were actually talks about, I don't think he will make it because the Italian style of football is different, which is true. It was different as opposed to the French style of football. But the man adapted because why? He was made to conquer. He was made to win. George was made to win. Everywhere he went, he had the Midas touch. That everything he touched, it turned to something positive, something good, something appreciated. That was George. So he went to Italy, AC Milan. My goodness, he had to. AC Milan is a mighty club. By the time it was owned by the late Italian premier. He's dead now, of course. Silvio Berlusconi, good friends to George. That's why when George was campaigning, all he could say, "I will let Silvio Berlusconi come here with their factory with this." They were close. But the idea, he took the club to another level. Imagine, this is a mighty club with plenty of history. George went there, this little black boy again, from West African Republic of Liberia, from poverty, from across the bridge. He's made it to Europe and is in all the papers, the magazines, the news outlets. George Weah, the Liberian, the this, the that. Can you imagine? Those days, you go somewhere, by the time you say I'm a Liberian, you say, George Weah, if it's visa, you're going, just like that. I mean, this is serious. So he conquered Italy as well, took AC Milan to higher height, won a couple of Scudettos with them. He became world player, world best, without going to World Cup. He became European best and African best. All at the same time, I think it was 1996 or somewhere around that. Still remember. Yeah, I think that's when the Lone Stars, the Lone Star, that's the Liberian national team, qualified for the first time for the African Cup of Nations, and I believe that was in South Africa. And I believe that's at the same time George was named the African Player of the Year. And he had this triple title at the same time. Huge titles, winning Ballon d'Or, one of the most prestigious awards in the game. This was George. Anyway, like I said, he used to fly and come back. When he come home, we will be there. He will tell us stories. Sometimes visit some of those areas where he came from. He will visit those areas where he came from. And these areas were dangerous, but nobody could harm him. He was a people's person. This is where I'm saying like the leadership quality was there, but wasn't harnessed. The same way he was a star footballer. I did not have the opportunity of being spotted, being scouted, being recruited, and meeting a manager such as Wenger who polished him up. He would have been lost just like millions of others that we don't know. Anyway, he played in Italy, and by the time his football career was ending, he moved over to England, where I am. He played for Man City. He played for Chelsea, but this all was in loan. He was on loan, and he was finishing now. But he scored powerful goals. Few. He was a goal poacher. He knew the goal with his back turned to the goal. He knew the goal, and like he said, people like Gianluca Vialli and others, those Italian guys, Paolo Maldini. I heard that he passed. I'm not sure. I'll have to look this up. Who was the captain of AC Milan then? Yeah, they said this guy can do anything with the football. And of course he did. He scored powerful goals. He took the football at the time, record breaking from his own half, from basically inside his own box, 18-yard box, and went solo to the other side and scored. Nothing rival it then, but I think other people have, broken the record. Yeah. So after he finished his career here, he went to the Middle East and played for a while. And then finally, he hung up his boots and then went into politics. Before going to politics, he went kind of low. And obviously, rumors were around that George is broke, never had money. He had gone broke. But of course, when you've had money and fame and they say you broke, it doesn't mean that you can afford to buy a loaf of bread. You see, we need to understand the differences in this kind of behavior, in this kind of tendency. Doesn't mean that you can't buy a pair of shoes. Of course, you can buy these things, but you no longer have the kind of bread that you used to have. And the way you used to live, you're not living like that any longer. It takes a while for people to begin to see. So yes, there was this rumors going around. But anyway, I will leave that to conjecture. But what this denotes, as I've just explained, is one of humility. I don't know George for the few times that I've been around him and looking at his personality and listening to people who know him very well, who will not say nice things about him, not because he's president, long before he became president, in fact. This guy was outgoing. He would basically beg people because he simply wants to play football. He came from nowhere. Things like you would say, literally from the gutter, from poverty to riches, from Claratown, poverty-stricken end, to being the president, the highest office of the land. He occupied it. Which brings me into how he went into politics, which I don't know, because by then I'd exited the scene. Well, of course, he was one of the most popular sons of the soil. And we heard that he even won the first election attempt that he made against the former Liberian leader, Helen Johnson Sirleaf. But then He wasn't really mature at the time, wasn't really prepared, for the presidency at the time. So they talk him out of it. It's like, let this one slide, let this one go. Okay, you go, doctor yourself up, fix yourself up, prepare for this journey. This is not a funny journey. This is the presidency of a nation. It entails a lot of other things, qualities, and etc. So go and study, polish yourself up, be prepared for the task. There's a tendency, a high likelihood that you will win because you are the people's person. And of course, after a couple of years, he came back and he won the elections, became the president. He was to rule for only one term. At a time when presidents are refusing to leave when they lose elections, or will do everything within their power to take an election, to rig an election, to win an election and deprive the people of their franchise, their rights, their democratic rights. George felt so humble, as he has always been, that I came from nowhere and I was given the opportunity to serve the Liberian people. Despite all that is being said, but the country has given me so much. The country from where I came from, as a very poor boy, from where people from this very land prayed for me. And I mean it literally. People prayed for him because he was such a good guy. He was giving his wealth left, right, and center, helping people. You want to travel, he will help you. And he helped so many Liberians that played football. Unfortunately, none of them made it. I mean, like big time, not even Salensa, who was the king of kings in terms of football. And you had many who followed in that step. Prince Day, Abraham Burnbrand Jackson, Chinny King, that's Alexander Freeman. Many, I've forgotten some of the names, James Carroll, and all of them. A lot of them went Europe, Simeon Mata, Alexander Theo. Unfortunately, none of them rose to the occasion as George. But probably that's what was written, that after George, it will take a while, another 100 years for another Liberian to come, and occupy this spot. So basically, that's what it is. So George made it to the presidency and was really pleased with what Liberians did for him. So at a time when other presidents could contest the result, or even not contesting, but try to rig the results in their favor, because remember, they are the ones in power. They've got access to everything that you need, all the tools for rigging an elections. And one thing that George said long before the elections in Liberia, I think there has been a flurry of coups within the last 2 years plus within the region. I think 7 or so in 2 years. That's Niger, that's Mali, that's Burkina Faso, that's Chad, that's Gabon, and I think 1 or 2 other places that does not immediately come up in my head. He said, and he was absolutely right, philosophical, and this is fundamental going forward and understanding, how do we stop this tendency? George said, until issues regarding institutional coup, I love this, honestly. Issues relating to institutional coups are addressed, then the real coups will continue to happen. The bloody coups will continue to happen. The usurping of power will continue to happen. As long as there is a lack of social justice, as long as the primary concern for citizens is not attended to, not regarded, not addressed by governments, there will always be attempts at usurping power. That I know for sure. And this is what exactly is going to happen. So, ladies and gentlemen, George bowed out of the presidency in a very humble way. He came from a humble background. He continued to remain humble. He showed this humility to the Liberian people who appointed him as president, who voted for him as president. And when they said, we don't need you any longer because you have not lived up to our expectations, he said, okay, my people, I've heard you. And for this, I am leaving. But I thank you all for giving me the opportunity to serve you, if only for one term. But this is how grateful I am. God has blessed me. I have played the highest level of football in the world. I have been the best player in the world. They've given me accolades for that. I've been the best European footballer in the world. I've been the best African footballer in the world. I've been president of my nation. And I am really, really very proud. So now I feel humble and I thank you very much and I will leave. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. This is the man, George Oppong Manneh Weah. Ladies and gentlemen, I think I've said enough about George. He was a great guy. He's still a great guy. And I love him to bits, to be honest. I know what he did. And I want to say thank you to you all for giving me the opportunity to lay this case in front of you, because I've been wanting to talk about George for quite a long time. Tonight I had the opportunity, and I think I've done myself justice. I've done justice for you all, I believe. And I thank you very much. Until we catch up again next week, when we'll be bringing a former presidential contender in Sierra Leone, I have been your host and presenter, Prince Emil Krumah, saying goodbye for now. Stay blessed. Goodbye.